Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's so good to be here. Dr. Cha left out one special part of our story. We're sort of related because our godchildren are siblings. So Reverend Dr. Brenda McNeil was here. Her daughter is Dr. Cha's goddaughter, and her son Omari is my godson. And so we're connected in that way as well. I really am glad to be here today. It's wonderful to see all of you. It's a beautiful drive here, and there's so much that's in my heart. And I know that you break up into groups in about 10 minutes, so let me just jump into what I have to share. I am giving a lecture later this afternoon at 3 p.m., I believe. And so if you can come back to that, I'd love to be able to talk with you further about work that we are doing. But it's a real delight to be here. I've got to also embarrass one person. I've got to give a shout out to Sinclair, because she's also I met her when she was a student at our church. So I'm saying like the Fountain of Life diaspora here, and I'm getting misty-eyed. So Sinclair, I'm so proud of you. You told me you want to go to seminary. So I'm from Madison, Wisconsin, and we are jacked up. There are issues that are facing our educational system, and I think that the church has an ability to really touch this and have some solutions. I'm glad that this is more of an address than a sermon or trying to talk about this at chapel, because it's hard to bring up some of the information and to communicate things in a sermon when you just need to really be able to talk. A number of years ago, a report came out. It was funded by the Annie E. Casey Foundation. It was called the Racial Disparity Study in Madison, Wisconsin. And what we found is the race to equity. What we found is we have the greatest disparity between black and white students at 4th and 8th grade than any other place in the country. Because Madison prides itself in being the Berkeley of the Midwest, liberal, free-hearted, free-thinking. We were shocked to hear this, and we ignored it. We took the report, we basically put it in the circular file and did not pay much attention to it. The fact that we don't know how to pay attention to data when we are the home of a world-class institution, the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and we have not learned to respond to data that does not work in our favor, it's set up a process for really ignoring what's really happening among us. And so I want to just talk you through a little bit about this, about what this looks like. Let me just fast forward it a bit, and then I'll also talk about some steps about what the church community can do. Education in itself is not in a vacuum. We compartmentalize the sectors of our community, and you can't do that with education, in my opinion. Because as we dug deeper into our research, what we also found is we lead the nation in the incarceration of black men. Black men are 5% of Wisconsin state population, and we are nearly 50% of the state's prison population. Right now, Wisconsin is planning to host its second privatized prison. They're traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Its symbol is CCA, Christian Corporation of America. It's headed up by a Sunday school teacher, a good Bible-believing, Bible-thumping brother who lives in Memphis, Tennessee. And he talks about the holdings for folks who invest in this and assure them a return on their investment. There's a pipeline, according to Mark Maurer, who is a researcher and a sociologist on the issues of criminal justice, that there's a pipeline in Wisconsin, that we're finding that there's a correlation between the percentage of African-American children who are not graduating and the percentage of African-Americans who are going into prison systems. So what happens is if you are not reading by 3rd grade level, we're determining what prisons we're going to build and how we're going to build them. When that prophecy is self-fulfilled, while government is quiet, the community is quiet, and the church is quiet, these children drop out, they become truant and other things, they are fast-tracked into prison systems. There's a lot of other things going on there, but I've only got 10 minutes, so let me just suffice it to say that. And then you have men and women who are not in their children's homes. So fathers who are not there, but mothers tend to still bring their children from time to visit fathers in prisons. But when moms go to prison, there's no one to bring children to see her, because typically grandma's raising the children, and she's got too much going on than to bring children up to Cheetah State Prison. And so you have this breakdown of family that leads to socioeconomic dysfunction, and then it's just this ugly, ugly cycle, and is what we're experiencing in Wisconsin. And so education does not stand alone. So we're still separate, but still also very, very unequal. Here's what I think in a nutshell happened in Wisconsin. When my family moved there from the west side of Chicago in 1970 for my mom to go to the University of Wisconsin, the total minority population was about 2%. From 1980 to 1990, the black population in particular doubled. Madison, that probably only meant like 35 more people. But for Madison, they were not used to that level of diversity. And the black community who was present said, we need more black teachers, social workers, counselors, principals. We need more black school teachers. Madison, in its pseudo-liberal, protected self, said, no, 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 no. We're kind, we're loving, we do everybody. We love everyone. We love little Negro kids so they can come here and we'll teach them. And as we started, I said that to be facetious. The numbers started increasing, the teachers were not used to the numbers. They did their internships and their placements in rural Wisconsin, in places like Evansville, Wisconsin. They were not ready for the emerging diversity because people like my mother, who was raised in Chicago, I know in Chicago, and nothing, she loved it. But when she came and found that there was money to go to school and she was able to go to college and able to get work, she told her sisters and her uncles and her friends and her boyfriend. And so people started bringing families and said, this is a place we can go to school. And there's a whole cohort of adult returning students who then paid cash for their kids to go to Wisconsin. My tuition was like $800 a semester 30 years ago. And so we saw this growth of people who came who could make Madison better and more diverse. And people pulled in the welcome mat and said, this is too much too soon, and had not put the things and the people and the systems in place to accommodate the diversity, the beautiful diversity that was coming, and they just did not respond, and it just clashed. We fast forward now, many of our schools are 50% non-white, when I was always one of 2 black students. I was an econ major, my undergrad. I sat in lectures with 600 students. I was one of 3 African-American students in a lecture of 600 people. That was just my life. I only had 2 black male teachers in my life, 1 black female, 2 black female teachers. So that's just the way things were. And so the inability to touch and connect just caused all kinds of problems. Meanwhile, students are dropping out and they're not faring well in the system. They're getting connected in drugs, and then the war on drugs is taking place. And it was just a perfect storm. And I think that there's been an opportunity for the church to really respond. And so I just want to state sort of the bleak picture of where we are. I think it's a great opportunity for the church. But we have to rethink scripture, rethink our theology, and really rethink our call to the communities in order to be a part of the solution. Because government and community-based organizations do not know what to do. And sometimes the church acts as if it doesn't either. And so this is why we have to talk. It's why we have lecture series like this so we can begin to think and talk about things. I recently had someone tweet out at me, a young white gentleman who said, hey, can you please tell me 3 top resources or media that explore issues facing the black community that you would recommend for me? Because I want to build empathy and healing within the church and culture in my sphere of influence. So he wrote this very nice email, teach me so that I can become sympathetic to what the black community is suffering. And I said, the real question that many white believers, Christian believers should ask is not what is going on, like what the black community is doing or these communities that are hurting, why this is going on. I think it's the question that the church has got to do, because you jump completely over the why and then you want to just gaze at what's happening in the inner city like you're going on a field trip through the Brookfield Zoo or something. Rather than understanding what the true issues are, then you never have to understand or accept any culpability or systemic realities, and then you just get to go and watch these communities and say, tisk, tisk, and then pray, then brush the dust off your feet, and then go on about your little Christian lives. When we have to understand the complicity of the church in these systemic realities. Now, I don't have enough time to really break this down. I want to sound more than just like a conspiracy theorist, which I am on occasion. But there is plenty of empirical historical data that would support even the church's receipt. All you got to do is just get Dr. Soong-Chan Rao on this note about the church's complicity, accepting slaves, tie, all of these things. Christianity could have shut down slavery if it wanted to, but Christianity did not want to. And so the same churches and ministries and seminaries and denominations that have benefited from that work and now say, oh my God, what's happened? What happened? What happened? No one said stop when there was a chance to stop. And we get to be the generation that gets to not only look back and say that was wrong, but let's right some of the wrongs. We can't just demonize our collective Christian ancestors. We've got to begin to say, God, how do we rectify this scenario? The ugliness of disparity is that when you have 50% of your black students not graduating, counselors and teachers begin to think that if you're black, you are not graduating. So in my family, I always say this just to talk about our background. My mom dropped out of high school when she was a freshman and got her undergrad and master's degree at Wisconsin. She graduated on an honor roll and stopped going to school her freshman year. She paid cash for me to go to school. My sister went. This year, my daughter graduates, so we're third-generation Badgers, and in our family, we have 11 degrees, undergraduate, graduate, and terminal degrees from Wisconsin. My daughter graduates, it'll be our 12th. But when she went to her counselor at my alma mater high school and said, I want to go to Wisconsin, the counselor told her she would not get in. When she went back to apply for a smaller state school, the counselor opened the computer, looked at my daughter's grades, and said, you have good grades. Lexi, you have really good grades. And then started pulling her out of class, trying to get her to apply to private schools like Wash U in St. Louis. That woman did not look at my daughter's grades when she went in for the first time, because the assumption was she was a jock, she was a city champ in track and field, and that she probably just decided at the last minute she wanted to go to Wisconsin, not knowing that this young lady's parents and grandmother went to this university and didn't even give her the chance. And so what's so ugly about the racial disparity is that it talks about the students who are failing. It does not talk about the lament of the two-parent households, both of whom have degrees, whose children are told to go to technical school and steered away from major universities. No one talks about that reality. That is my reality. And so when you have tremendous disparities, such as we have in Wisconsin, everyone becomes suspicious. So it doesn't matter that I live in the suburbs, that my wife and I both have degrees, that I have an advanced degree, that I'm a published author, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. My child is still at risk because of the color of her skin and the perception of those who make college referrals and who write letters of support. The church historically has been at the forefront of educating those in the margins. The universities, the great universities in Europe were built and held in cathedrals because people wanted to teach the importance of Bible reading. In Africa, missionaries came and taught folks in places like Ghana, where the education allowed people to overthrow colonialist government and be able to have the wherewithal to build their own economic base through education to say to the Brits, we're tired of you. In the 1780s, London instituted Sunday school to teach young street urchins who were white not how to read, to break down the street gangs. And when laws changed in France so that there was a separation of church and state, nuns fled to the US, went into inner cities, and taught our kids, immigrants' kids and African-American kids, how to read and math and all of these things to begin, and it helped to turn the tide in child labor laws. This is the church. This is what the church has done educationally. They didn't read reports. They didn't just write letters. They didn't just have sermon series. They sent nuns. They started Sunday school. They turned churches into universities. They taught people to read in black Sunday school, and our traditional black churches taught us to read. You can't learn the Bible if you can't read the Bible. So when it was illegal, we still taught our participants how to read the Bible. This happened in the church. We now delegate those things. We outsource those things. We pay for others to come and do it. And we're looking at things that are happening. And most of the children who are dying and being sucked into this cesspool of social injustice live and fail and die within an earshot of the churches we worship in. And it's heartbreaking. Just 2 more minutes. When we were separate and equal, when my mom was young and folks went to historically black colleges on a per capita basis, more of our black children went into black colleges, into accounting school, nursing school, medical school, dental school, on a per capita basis when we were separate, because many of our black teachers could not teach at white institutions if they had advanced degrees. So the science teachers in many of our black high schools were scientists. Many of our botany teachers were botanists. Many of the chemistry teachers were chemists because they couldn't get hired by DuPont and other companies, so they taught school. And when we decided that we wanted to integrate the students, we did not integrate the teachers. So the day that we integrated black students into white schools, 36,000 black teachers lost their jobs. 36,000. What's the big question right now in education? Where are the black teachers? Where are the black teachers? We fired them, because we wanted their children, and believe me, there was some economic stuff behind it. There was something about a tax base. Please do not think that governmental systems and educational systems were that excited about little brown kids sitting next to white students. So they brought the students in, but fired those black teachers, and they became domestics and housekeepers. Hence, this journey and this downward spiral begins. In '69, my first grade teacher told me I could be the president of the United States when I said that that's what I wanted to do in Mrs. Turner's classroom on the west side of Chicago. In 1970, my mother, a high school dropout, was told by the University of Wisconsin-Madison, you scored so well, you can come to Wisconsin with no high school education. But in 2012, my daughter is questioning if she wants to take AP classes. She's asked by her friends how she got into Wisconsin because she's a National Honor Society student. But they're saying it must be nice to be black, assuming that her admission was tied to her skin and not to her brilliance and her mother and her father and her grandmother. So these are the things that create this pipeline. But for centuries, the church has done this. In Deuteronomy 4:4, God talks about education. We just think about that in terms of learning God's law, but the folks were taught to teach your children that they may understand their legacy with God, because that was also about identity. It wasn't just about the ability to quote laws, it was about the ability to cope with life. Because folks who knew who they were with God would keep God in chains, keep God in loss, keep God in brokenness, keep God when they're in a pit, keep God when they're disenfranchised. Folks who know God can have an identity that would help them to succeed against all odds. When we stop teaching our children stop knowing who they are and who their God is. They lose the trajectory that Frederick Douglass, that Booker T. Washington talked about, that education brings. Socialist mayor, his name is Emil Seidel. He was a mayor of Milwaukee in 1910. He begged the churches in 1910 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, one of the most segregated places in the country now. He said to the church, while you are out fighting for some theological dogma, our boys and girls are going to hell. The mayor made a plea to the church to be the church. We created over the years a nonprofit called Nehemiah. We have programs. We've invited churches to help us. 2 of the large EV-free churches in Madison have supported our work. We've built a coalition with about 10 or 15 churches. Through volunteers, through donations, we've been able to not only build programs that empower African-American kids and support their families. We've developed the ability to go in and advocate on their behalf and challenge their teachers, challenge systems that are unfair. That's been so key. I'm so sorry, I don't have enough time to go through all of these pieces, but what I want to ask you is, you've got your own questions. Who are the next group of nuns? Who in exile is going to go to the inner cities and help save a whole generation? Because if we don't fix this, we've lost 2 generations. And so a couple things that you can do is, you can make sure that the church can offer space. It can recruit teachers. It can become an after-school program site. It can support a church that's doing after-school programs like ours. We reached out to the African-American community, but many of our white colleagues supported our work so that we could catch kids who were deemed incorrigible in their schools. So there are a number of things that we can do. Start after-school programs, college readiness programs, college tour programs. All of these things help, but support for the parents as well, because parents are overwhelmed. And when we tried to advocate for our kids, for our daughter, my daughter said, no, parents come to school for kids who are in trouble, and if you come to the school, I'll be embarrassed. So there are kids who are fending for themselves, who have the good grades, who really don't need to be doing that. So it's caused some very real dynamics, but historically, with less than what we have, less than what we know, the church has changed the world in Europe, in Africa, in North America. We've done it through education, but that education was backed by love, respect, and seeing the ability of these individuals. There are a number of programs that churches can do to address these issues, but the church needs is a vision adjustment to understand that these children are made in God's image and likeness, and if we allow this type of talent to be spilled and wasted, we are breaking the very heart of God. I think the church has a great opportunity to really be the church, and as seminarians, you have a great opportunity to influence how we really rethink our community and our folks and our mission field that's within blocks of our church. I wish I had more time to talk about this. I'm really passionate about these issues, but the church can turn this educational tide by just saying no and speaking to the teachers, principals, social workers, judges, DAs, public defenders, social workers in our pews. These folks go to somebody's church, and they're not being challenged often enough from the pulpit to think differently. So they bring old views into new classrooms, and our kids suffer. And this is costly, and somebody's got to give an account for this. Thank you.